All right, folks, welcome back to the third and final review video for midterm two. This one is on the beginning of our Caribbean unit, Cuba and Haiti, specifically the Afro-Caribbean religious traditions that are that exist in each country. Okay, so I started off with some general historical knowledge, and I did spend some time on this, so you should know the basic facts. The way I started it, let's see, first, in the Cuba section here, there's a little bit on the basic facts about Spanish colonialization or colonialism in the Americas. So Spain was the first European country to begin to colonize and settle in the Americas. And the first places they arrived were Cuba and Hispaniola, and perhaps a couple of other Caribbean or Bahamian islands. So Cuba and the island of Hispaniola, which the country of Haiti and the Dominican Republic share. So this is the island of Hispaniola. Cuba is its own island. These are the oldest European settlements in the Americas since 1492, since Christopher Columbus. Then I went on a little bit about Spanish colonization, how they colonized quite a large amount of the Americas. And there was an agreement between Portugal and Spain that the Portuguese would get this eastern part, um, which basically became Brazil. And then Spain had multiple regional colonies throughout the Americas. But for the purposes of the exam, you should be aware that initially, neither Hispaniola nor Cuba was really the main focus of um, Spanish colonialism at the time that the French started to turn colonial Saint-Domingue into a major sugar producer. So if we go to the Haiti notes, we'll start there. So all of Hispaniola, as evidenced by the name Hispaniola, was Spanish. And then in 1697, you don't need to know that date, but you should be aware that basically this French colony of Saint-Domingue existed for about 100 years, for basically the 18th century, which is to say the 1700s. So starting at the very end of the 17th century, 1697, there was an agreement between Spain and France, and Spain took the western one-third of Hispaniola, which became the French colony of Saint-Domingue. And France heavily invested in this colony, and it became a major site of the slave trade. And it grew to become the um, wealthiest, one of the wealthiest plantations in the world, and the biggest sugar producer in the world. So the plantation owners and slave owners, major slave owners of colonial Saint-Domingue, were some of the wealthiest people in the world throughout the 18th century. And this corresponded with the rise of the French monarch, the expansion um, of France's imperial power. I mentioned that France had this huge area known as Louisiana, named after King Louis. And we'll get back to that in a minute. But sugar plantations were particularly brutal plantation systems, and um, people had died very quickly on them. There was a fairly short lifespan of slave laborers on sugar plantations, which meant that there was um, a lot of importation of people from Africa year after year. So there was constantly new people coming from Africa to Saint-Domingue. And then in 1790, so if you go back to our notes, this pressure cooker situation ultimately led to slave revolts beginning in the 1790s. And then that led to a 15-year war, which ended up in Saint-Domingue being dissolved as a colony and the new uh, autonomous free nation of Haiti, or as it's called, Haiti, being born in 1804. Napoleon was the emperor of France at the end of this war, and the Haitians beat Napoleon. And because of that defeat, Napoleon sold off this large area of Louisiana to the United States, which greatly expanded the territory of the United States, basically to the Mississippi River. So that was the Louisiana Purchase of 1803. So they sold it the year before the war was finally settled, but it was directly the result of losing Saint-Domingue. And this was a major historical event. It sent shockwaves of terror throughout the European world, um, and other slave-owning societies like the United States. So this led to Haiti, the newly formed nation of Haiti, which was the first country in the world to legally abolish slavery and the first free black republic in the world. It led to Haiti being isolated from the rest of the world. The more powerful global powers wanted nothing to do it or wanted to bully it. So that led to an economic decline in Haiti, which led it to becoming quite a poor country. It always had faced an economic problem because the plantation system had been its entire economy, and it found it difficult to pivot to another economic model. So we'll get back to Haiti, but because of Haiti's collapse, that left a vacuum in the sugar production, global sugar production, and a huge demand. And Cuba ended up taking over that demand. So Cuba was a Spanish colony at this time. And in the 19th century, after the Haitian Revolution, Cuba became a major site of sugar production, becoming the major sugar producing colony in the world, and thus becoming one of the biggest slave societies in the world. In the 19th century, well, very late in the history of the slave trade. Which means for our cultural studies purposes that people who were brought to Cuba in the 19th century as slaves had very close connections to African cultures that they were taken from. And specifically, while the major sites of departure from the continent of Africa for the slave trade were this area of what's now Senegal, um, including people who were related to the Mande people that we discussed, Muslim West Africans, and then that was actually the smallest site. And then the second largest site was the area that we're going to focus on, this area of West Africa, especially including Benin and Western Nigeria, which at the time was known as the Slave Coast. And then the largest site where people were taken from was actually this area of coastal Central Africa around the Congo River Basin and the broader Congo region. Um, so in the 19th century, specifically the Yoruba of Western Nigeria, this area, were taken in large numbers to Cuba and also to Brazil, but we're focusing on Cuba. And Yoruba culture and Yoruba religion became the major feature of Afro-Cuban religion. And this became the practice of Santeria. I mentioned Santeria is the Spanish word related to the term santos, which means saints. But I also said that it is known as La Regla de Oshá, which is an adjusted term. Oshá is an adjusted form of the Yoruba term for spirits, which is Orisha. So you can look at my notes here. Orisha is the name for Yoruba spirits from the Yoruba of Nigeria. And the songs of Santeria are in a 200-year-old form of Yoruba. Though not all of the meaning of the words is remembered among the Afro-Cuban practitioners, but the songs are sung in Yoruba, which is very unique and indicative of just how precisely recreated this tradition was in Cuba. While the Cuban people, of course, speak Spanish, these songs are in Yoruba, not Spanish. Okay, so we started off our discussion of the music of Santeria by talking about the bata drums. So this is one image. You can look at the other images I've posted. But this is an image of the three bata drums. The drum on the right is the largest one, and we talked about some features of these drums. They are double-headed, so they have two membranes, one on each side of the drum. And there's one for each of these drums, there's one larger head and one smaller head. And then the drum here that has proportionally the much larger head to smaller head, this is the main drum. Um, I showed some of this video that shows them. You see the main drum is wrapped in this cloth and also traditionally has bells attached to it. So it creates an idiophone um, sound that colors the drum sound. So that sort of complication of the timbre is something we've talked about before with African timbre, and we see that again here. So I played a little of this video just to show what the drums look like. You notice that they're rested on their sides, so they're played horizontally on the lap of practitioners. Okay, so you can watch that video. I'm going to quickly go through the different aspects of the music that we talked about, and then we'll just look at those in the track, the book track, for about 30 seconds. So let me just cut after this lady walks by so we can see the drums again. Um, okay, so the music is, for argument's sake, in a 12 beat meter. You may hear it more in a 6 beat meter. The book describes it more in a 6 beat meter, but I'm just going to keep it simple. Um, and we'll consider it in this 12 beat meter similar to the West African drumming ensemble. So you have this 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3. And the drums play in a polyrhythm. So their different parts are interlocking, um, and they add up to a more complicated rhythm. Also, the singing, which was especially featured in this video. There you hear the leader of song. So we use this video to show that this is another example of call and response. So there's a leader of the ritual, and then he sings, and then people respond. And then what they respond may change, but call and response is a major feature of the musical style. Okay, and otherwise, you can go through my notes for some other basic facts, which are similar to Vodou. So these are some descriptions of the ceremonies, but the ceremonies are structured with a particular order of spirits that are called. And our song is to Elegua, which is the first spirit that is called. Okay, so here I have that highlighted. Our song example is to Elegua, guardian of the gates of the spirit world, also guardian of the crossroads. This is the analog to Legba in Haitian Vodou, which we also talk about. So let's hear a little bit of that song now. This is the track labeled More. So we're looking at Moore's textbook here, Music of Latin America, and the text and the song is labeled More Elegua Ogun Oshosi. Long fade in. All right, so just to reiterate that it's to Elegua. So they're singing Ago Elegua, Abunkeke, praise to Elegua. He takes, he can be so rich. So the song is to Elegua, and that is typical of Santeria songs and also Vodou songs, that the songs are direct songs sung to a particular spirit that is named in the song. Um, so the songs and the ritual goes in a particular order, starting with Elegua and through a number of other spirits, roughly 20 spirits. There are particular rhythms that would go to particular songs, and there are particular songs, of course, for each spirit. Um, and then this goes on for some hours. People are dancing, as you can see in the videos, and singing in the call and response style, and then spirit possession may happen, um, which I'm going to discuss more in the context of Haitian voodoo. But just to point out the similarities, in Santeria, there is animal sacrifice and spirit possession, like in Haitian Vodou. Um, okay. Okay, so we've gone through most of the facts of Santeria. Um, this reading is not very long. The opening part of the reading is just a little bit about general history of Hispanic Latin America, which I just covered the main details of. And then the part that is directly related to the musical example starts with African influenced traditions, about on page 3 or so. Let me see here. One, two. So really page 4, and then Batam music. And then this is all the details that we discussed. So we've covered most of these in this lecture. The other thing that I'll mention that I'll also elaborate more in the Haiti example is that this religion is syncretic, which means that there has been a combining of Catholic elements with African elements. And there's people make parallels between the two traditions, specifically between saints in Catholicism and particular Orisha spirits in Santeria. So Elegua, as I mentioned, um, is equated, well, in Haiti, he's equated with Saint Peter, the guardian of the gates. And generally speaking, in Santeria, there's also these equations between saints and different Orisha. Okay, so that's the basic facts of Cuban Santeria. And now moving to Haiti, we discussed the Haitian Revolution. Now we'll talk about Haitian Vodou. Okay, so seeing that Haiti is one of my research specialties, I did give more information about it. And the basic facts of what I said, my lecture notes are fairly sparse, really a shorthand for me. But you can find basic facts in a brief amount of this reading in Peter Manuel, CUNY professor, by the way, and my advisor. Um, his book, Caribbean Currents. And this section here gives a little bit, the beginning that I posted gives a little bit of the history of Haiti, but that we already covered. Um, so skipping ahead, this gives a little description of the Haitian Creole language, which I did mention. I said that Haitian Creole was a pragmatic language based on the language of the masters, French. So most of the words, the grammar of it, the vocabulary is um, French, but it has an African syntax and some African words. But it's the pragmatic language that developed on slave plantations that then became the language of the masses of Haiti. But only late in its history did it become one of the official languages of Haiti. Initially, the official language of Haiti was French. But besides being the language of everyday life of Haiti, Creole is the language of Haitian Vodou. So that's a big difference between Haitian Vodou and Santeria, because Santeria uses an actual African language, Yoruba, whereas because Haiti was separated from well, through the slave trade, separated from the slave trade, so there weren't more people coming more recently in history from Africa to Haiti. It's a bit more distanced from its direct connection to African traditions. So linguistically, the songs of Haitian Vodou are in Haitian Creole, not in an explicit African language. But especially in the drums and the rhythms, which we'll talk about in a minute, those do very closely parallel West African drumming traditions. Okay, so that's the Haitian Creole language. You should just know that fact. But then this section here, starting on page 148. This is a good, short, detailed explanation just about 3 pages. So one, then these images, two, three, then just all right, three and a half. Although um, you can skip this last part. This part is about negative hate, negative portrayals of voodoo, um, especially in Hollywood movies, which is an issue that I mentioned, but it's not a lot of facts that will be on our test. But just these 3 pages of text, and you can look at these good images. Um, some of these are of Frisner Augustin, who was a New York-based Haitian drummer who actually used to run a drum workshop at Hunter College, but he sadly died about 5 or more years ago. Okay, so this is a good little quick background on Haitian Vodou that I would recommend. You don't need to know all these terms, like Loa, that's the name for spirits. Ungon, Unsi, I did mention all these, name for voodoo practitioner or voodoo priest. Um, Veve is the name of the cornmeal or flour symbols that are drawn on the ground during the ceremonies, like you saw in the documentary. But as far as just here's what Haitian voodoo is, here's the basic facts. It synthesizes beliefs, African beliefs with Catholic beliefs. There's a correlation between the spirits and different Catholic saints. It doesn't mention St. Peter and Legba. It does mention Dambala, the serpent spirit from the video, and how that's associated with St. Patrick. Um, it does mention what I explicitly said here, that the metaphor used within Haitian Vodou is one of mounting. So the Loa mounts the horse. So this paragraph is directly what I was telling you about. Um, okay, and then let's see. It does talk about Legba here. It does talk about the issue I talked about of how different groups of spirits from different parts of Africa are organized into different nations. And the one that we talked about especially, which is the most dominant one, the most prominent, is the Rada Nation. And then you have some details of the Rada Nation and the drums specifically, because we did talk about Rada drums. So the Rada Nation, 3 drums. I'm not asking you to know the names of the drums, but these are the names of the drums. The main drum is called the Mama, and also the Segon Ambula. Let's see, just quickly seeing what else to highlight from this. They do talk about animal sacrifice here, which I also talked about. So this is a good summary of things that I talked about. So you should read these 3.5 pages. They talk about some of the way that a voodoo ceremony unfolds, and that they can be held indoors or outdoors. And they talk about spirit possession and mounting, and also they do mention what I said about how the beginning of a possession can be this a little bit more aggressive or disturbed, which is known as the crisis phase. And then right here, once the Loa has settled in, once the spirit has settled in, the worshiper, the person who's possessed, takes on the personality traits of that spirit. So in the video we watched, it was the serpent spirit, but otherwise it might be this female spirit, the spirit of love and sensuality, Ezeli Freda, and then the person would behave like Ezeli. So people behave like the spirit. Okay, so yeah, the manual Haitian Voodoo reading, especially the part labeled Creole religion, Voodoo in Haiti, or just some Creolization in Haiti religion. Um, those few pages are a very good summary of the details that I gave you. We'll quickly look over my notes here. Sometimes they're pretty sparse in a shorthand. So this is the history we talked about. As far as things you need to know, the Creole language, we talked about the Rada nation from the Fon people of Benin. You do not need to know the names of the drums, but you should know that there are 3 drums. We'll look at the drums. Let's look at them now. So here's an image of Rada drums. The thing that I pointed out is that they have an animal skin held by these large pegs here, and that's the specific feature that's similar to the construction of fawn drums in Benin. They're often painted in ornate ways, and they're not double-headed. They're played vertically. The bottom of the drum shell is open, and just one membrane. And then this big drum is played with one hand and a stick, as we saw in this video, with this gentleman in blue being the lead drummer playing with one open hand and one stick, which is typical of how you play the Rada drums specifically. The drums play in interlocking parts. They play in 12-beat pattern. So now would be a good time for us to look at some videos. So let's do the video very quickly, and then we'll play mostly the full 45 seconds, or at least 30 seconds of the audio track. So let's go here. Okay, so you see a little bit of the soloing of the lead drummer. The other two drummers are playing a cross rhythm, but interlocking parts, not varying their part, but two stable, repeating interlocking parts. Let's go to our example track, which is Miller 12, Haiti, Vodou Ritual. Remember, only the first 45 seconds of this track are the Vodou Ritual. The second part of the track is something different that is not on our test. Okay, I'm going to play this track again. Okay, so before the drums come in, you hear a few things. First of all, you hear call and response again. The particular spirit they're singing to is Bosu, but you don't need to know that. But once again, we do have a song that's sung specifically to a spirit, calling to that spirit. Just saying hello, good evening. Rele bonsoir means I call to you, good evening. Um, then you hear the click of the drummer's stick on the side of the drum, and you also hear this rattle, which we'll talk about. That's the asson, the sacred rattle. So the first thing you hear besides the hit of the stick on the side of the drum is the asson, the sacred rattle. So in my lectures, okay, so here, the asson, the sacred rattle, both a ritual tool by the priests and also an instrument for keeping time. And we hear that the song is in call and response. There's a leader of the song, and then there's the group singing. So the leader sings, the group responds, Bosu Kilinjo, and then the leader sings again, the group responds. And then later in the song, the group switches to what the leader was singing at the beginning, Bosu Joea, and the leader goes and sings something else. So it's a call and response. Then the drumming comes in. We hear that the drumming is clearly in a 12-beat meter. So you're in that 1 2 3 2 2 3 3 2 3 4 2 3. So it's in a 12-beat meter. It's in a cross. There's cross rhythms. There's a polymeter. Each drum has its own rhythm part. They combine together. You also can hear in the track the bell pattern. So you hear that West African timeline, very similar. Bum 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 bum. So you hear the bell pattern, you hear the 12-beat meter, you hear the cross rhythm, and then you hear later in the track the lead drummer soloing. So those are the key features of the drumming. And then the singing, the main thing you need to know is that it's in call and response. So let's hear all that. I'm going to go back a little bit to when the drums come in. There you hear the bell part. Bum, 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 bum. Now you're going to start hearing more and more little solos, or drum fills is a term for a short solo in drums. So little solos of the lead drummer using the stick hitting the top of the drum. And that's not in a regular pattern, that's improvised. But the rest of the drums play in a regular repeating pattern, and that pattern combines in the interlocking parts, similar to the West African drumming. Okay, so I think we've covered the main musical features. The bell pattern is syncopated, like they are in Western timelines, West African timelines. These are the drums of the Rada Nation. You don't need to know the names of the drums. You should know the name of the Esson, the sacred rattle. You should know that the song is in call and response. You should know that the songs are songs to particular spirits by and large. And like in Santeria, there's an order of spirits, roughly 20. You start with Legba, who is the Haitian equivalent of Elegua, the keeper of the gates. Yep, and I think that's basically it. This is the name of the longer documentary, the classic famous documentary from filmed in the 1950s. Maya Deren is the filmmaker, Divine Horseman is the name of the documentary. So I'll play a little bit of that, but I'm not going to play the whole thing. That's available on your links, so you can watch that. But one thing to point out here is I played from about minute 2:45 till about minute 8 or 9. But here you see the drumming ensemble, and you see one of the people who has an ascent. In this particular ritual, there were about 3 people with ascent, which is the rattle. And remember, the rattle is both a tool, a ritual tool of the Vodou priest, and also a musical instrument. So we'll just look at a few seconds of this.
Around the center post, all ritual movements and dance
There you see the drums, 3 drums, one large main drum hit by a stick, blocked by this gentleman here.
revolve.
There's another good shot of the ascent, the rattle. Okay, and you can feel free to rewatch that documentary. And the last thing I'll say is the manual reading is better for a broad overview of Vodou. But the couple paragraphs right before the listening guide in the Miller book do have a good quick distillation of similar information. The iron bell, the Rada drums, timeline patterns. So things that I already talked about. You can skip this. This is about the second part of the track. And then here's our listening guide. Just for the first 45 seconds, it will lead you through what we talked about. And that is it. So that's the end of our Caribbean review, and thus the end of all 3 reviews. Best of luck. Email me any questions, and goodbye.